Hey folks, I'm Alex Dowd.
And I'm Katie Reif.
Halloween, the holiday, is still 2 weeks off, but the movie franchise named after it is back this very weekend. On a special bonus episode of the show, Katie and I discuss Halloween Kills, the 13th entry in the undying slasher franchise. Keep listening to find out if it made believers out of these Halloween reboot skeptics, or just hardened our opposition to the new mini franchise.
Welcome to Film Club.
Okay, folks, thanks again for joining us for a special bonus episode of Film Club. We have seen Halloween Kills. It's the new film in the undying Halloween franchise that began in 1978 with Halloween.
It just won't die.
It just will not die, like Michael Myers himself. Obviously, we did a full episode this week on the Halloween series, so if you're interested in our thoughts on these movies in general, you should hop over to that, listen to that full episode. This will be a little bit shorter. We're just a little bit more focused on the movie in front of us, Halloween Kills. Now, I would like to preface this by saying right off the bat that neither Katie nor myself are very big fans of the 2018 Halloween, directed by David Gordon Green.
I thought it was all right the first time I saw it, and then I went back and watched it again in preparation for Halloween Kills, and I liked it a little less the second. It went from pretty good to, I don't know, upon a second watch.
It actively irritates me, but I think partially that is
that's interesting, because this one actively irritated me. Okay.
We talk about that a little bit in the full episode, so if you want a little bit of a fuller thought on the 2018 Halloween, that's in there as well. I'll just reiterate here that I think that that one makes a lot of fuss about being some sort of direct legacy sequel to the original Halloween, the one we've all been waiting for, and then falls into a lot of the same pitfalls that the rest of this variably enjoyable franchise has. It really is not so different than any other lesser Halloween sequel. It just thinks a little more highly of itself.
Yeah, I think trying to have it both ways is sort of the raison d'etre of the David Gordon Green Halloween. They're really trying to, retcon sequels out of existence and then borrowing plot points from those same sequels, trying to be an uncomplicated, bloodbath and sort of a profound statement at the same time. And I think that the weaknesses of Halloween are really accentuated in Halloween Kills, because Halloween had a relatively straightforward plot, which, as we talked about on our main episode, is one of the calling cards of the Halloween franchise. And one of the things that makes the original Halloween so effective is how streamlined and elemental it is. But this movie just, it complicates everything at every turn. Like, it doesn't know what tone it wants to strike. It doesn't know who the main character of the movie is. Like, it doesn't know what it's trying to say. Like, it's didactic and confused at the same time, which is a kind of a annoying combination.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a movie that thinks it's saying something bigger about Halloween. And I guess on some level, I actually think I might prefer this to the last one, to be honest. Because to me, the last one felt ultimately like more of the fucking same. It was just like, let's just do Halloween again, the same old conventions that we've been recycling for 40 years, and just throw it into a new package, with a little more sort of inappropriate humor here, I guess.
Now that's where we disagree. I actually don't mind the humor in these movies as much as you do.
Yeah. No, I guess isolated, I wouldn't necessarily mind it. I think that it's often a real mood killer in these films.
Well, it's overcomplicating things and trying to do too much and having it both ways, in the sense that it wants to be scary. Like, it'll undercut its own scares with jokes and undercut the jokes with scares. Yeah.
I remember when Green first when it was first announced that Green was making a new Halloween before the 2018 one came out, he was very adamant that it was not a comedy. He was like, this is, we're playing it straight. But they don't play it exactly straight.
No. There's too many, funny side characters and stuff.
I have to say, in principle, I have a little bit of affection for that. Because Green is somebody who, obviously, over the course of his career, he's dabbled in various genres. And I think some of his worst films are the ones where there is no sense that he made it at all. Something like Our Brand is Crisis, the Sandra Bullock film from a few years ago, where you wouldn't necessarily guess watching it that it was a David Gordon Green film.
Yeah, he's a jack of all trades, and that in that way he can be kind of similar to Carpenter, who worked in a bunch of different things and just kind of took assignments when they came to him. But I don't think he's quite as skilled as Carpenter.
Well, no, I mean he's not the visual craftsman that Carpenter is. He's no slouch.
Yeah, the craft isn't on the same level.
Right. I do think that both of these movies are fairly well made, and I think they both have some kind of striking images in them. And what I was getting at before about Green sort of putting his signature on stuff is that he does find a way to make these movies his own in some respects, and I think a big part of that is the way that he sort of fills the margins of these movies with eccentric locals. You know?
Yeah, and in this film they brought back a few two minor characters from Halloween 2018, or fleshed out, and you spend a lot more time with them, and they're kind of endearing. You know, they're kind of charming characters when you fill them out like that, and they introduce a lot of kind of charming new characters as well. Yeah.
But the thing is, and this is one of the ways that it runs into trouble. I guess you could make the argument when you're talking about horror movies that a horror movie getting you to like the characters is not a bad strategy in terms of we should feel upset when characters are killed. Right. At the same time, this thing has a kind of this movie has a kind of inconsistent approach to its violence and to how it approaches the fact that we're watching a movie where somebody is sort of running around town murdering various people. So the movie kind of slips into this pattern where we'll be introduced to these kind of eccentric, offbeat bit players, you know, these sort of various people in Haddonfield, and very quickly get to like them over the course of a scene, really. Yeah. And then Michael Myers kills them.
But the thing is like you were saying, that's not a bad strategy to make you feel something about them dying. You still don't feel anything about them dying in these movies.
Yeah, you and I discussed this off mic a little bit, and I don't know how much of this blame can be put on David Gordon Green and how much of it can just be put on an audience. This movie contains a number of side characters who are introduced simply to be killed, and one of them includes a couple living in the old Myers house.
They did a great job renovating it. I loved the decor in there. I was like, wow, you guys did a really good job.
So it's a gay couple, and they're likable and funny. And,
they're really funny. We spend a lot of time with them. One of them's kind of a goofy stoner character. Yeah. The other one's a little bit more uptight, but they're loving. They seem to actually like each other, and they have fun kind of telling the kids in the neighborhood the tale of the Myers house and all this sort of thing.
They're not outrageous stereotypes either. No. I mean, Green really has an affection for the side characters in his worlds, and I think that's the case here. I don't think it's spoiling too much to say that Michael Myers eventually kills them.
What?
And their deaths are really brutal. And I don't know. I mean, hearing a crowd sort of cheer at that, it's very possible I'm overreacting about this and just being like way too sensitive about this. But it felt a little weird for the movie to engender a lot of sympathy about gay characters and then get the audience hooting and hollering about how brutally it kills them.
Yeah, okay. So did you feel like they were cheering extra hard to see the gay characters die? Because I feel like people were just walking in, wanting to hoot at the deaths in the movie.
Maybe that's more fair. Yeah. And honestly, and I will say, but one of them dies in an exceptionally graphic.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this is a kind of a mean-spirited movie in some ways.
It's very bloody. It's very gory. It's sadistic. It adds I would say that if you really want to get like nitpicky about the lore, Michael Myers tortures people in this movie, and he doesn't normally torture people.
Yeah,
That's
he acts
off character as much as Michael Myers is a character.
He acts more like a almost a serial killer in this, as opposed to this force.
He
technically is. But he in the first Halloween, obviously, he's kind of this force of faceless evil.
Yeah, and that's how Carpenter envisioned the character. Yeah. He's not supposed to have too much personality.
Right. And I'm fine with a movie that wants to take a different approach to him. Maybe that's more interesting than just recycling the same thing over and over again.
Sure.
But there are extended sequences in this where there's a little bit of a I guess my brain had a hard time dealing with the idea that these scenes existed just to warm us to these one or two scene characters. and then brutally, in a prolonged way, kill them, it left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth.
No, it left a bad taste in my mouth too, and I think it speaks to the core weakness of this film, which is that tonally it is taking wild swings all over the place with there's no guiding principle of craft holding all these tones together.
Yeah.
You know, like horror comedies are absolutely a thing. And creating pathos for characters before you kill them off is absolutely a thing. But it doesn't do that. It just swings wildly back and forth from comedy to brutality. And then you've got the whole thread where I said in the review that the headline that this movie shoots itself in the foot. And it does that because it made such a big deal about how the last one was really about trauma and about, Laurie Strode's being a survivor and all this kind of stuff, that they feel obligated to continue that thread in this movie. And so you have scenes of like Jamie Lee Curtis and Judy Greer like really acting hard, these women that are going through just complete emotional anguish. And then like he'll literally cut away to a joke.
Yeah.
And it's just not done skillfully. It's just not balanced. Like there doesn't seem to be any consideration for balancing all these different tones. They're just all kind of jammed in there. And as a result, like this movie is like, so you end up not feeling anything. You end up not laughing or gasping or empathizing with the Strodes because it's just all over the place.
Yeah, this is also a film that has some sort of lofty ideas of what it wants to be about. It's kind of that old canard about who's the real monster here. There's this whole thing about how Michael's the real way that he's attacked Haddonfield is that he's turned the people of Haddonfield into a mob. You know. And that plays out in just such a silly way, I think.
It plays out in a silly, dopey, obvious way.
Yeah, a really heavy-handed, too. I mean, there's like – I was not expecting a Halloween movie to have so many speeches about the character of a town or something,
Yeah, it really devolves into like Hallmark card poetry at the end of the movie with all of these monologues about – the nature of evil and shit like that.
Totally.
Like, oh. And that's just another tone that doesn't. It's like you were making a mixtape, but you made no effort to like match the songs to one another. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
there's
you
no
just
cohesiveness.
Yeah,
there.
You just went from like Dixie Chicks to Slayer with no attempt to like merge the two in any way. No matching the BPMs or fading in and out or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned up top that that this is a Halloween that, like the first Halloween, this is one that borrows a little bit from the franchise, and obviously that's something that kind of bugged me about Green's first Halloween movie was that it made such a big deal about how it was tossing out all those films, and then it ended up kind of sort of just resembling some of the films it was retconning.
Yeah, this one explicitly contains an Easter egg to a movie that is retconned out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of the sequels get some play in this one.
It's really trying to have it both ways, I think.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Halloween 4 in this film, which is not one of the more beloved sequels, I have to say. So it's sort of funny to see it draw on that one. There's also it's interesting. There's some of Halloween 2 in it, the original Halloween 2. As in the one from 1981, one of the many films that has been retconned by this series because. For those who remember that film, Jamie Lee Curtis spends a lot of that movie in the hospital because it's set on the same night as the original Halloween.
Yeah, and this one also picks up
Same
immediately after. Well, after a long flashback sequence, which is another way this film just bends in on itself and overcomplicates what should be a simple thing.
Can I say, though, that was my favorite part of the movie. In part because it promised something it did not deliver. I already made this joke on Twitter, but yeah, the movie opens with an extended flashback to 1978, and it's a little fun, I'll say, to see Green try to
find a fresh angle on that story.
Find a fresh angle.
Although he then beats it to death before the end of the movie.
Yeah, he does. But to mostly to just kind of play a little bit with the aesthetics of the first movie and to actually put us in the 70s
I do think
again.
it was kind of neat the way that I couldn't tell like if they were if it was just an After Effects thing or if they were shooting on film for the 70s parts, but it looks authentic in that way.
Yeah, no, it looks like celluloid. So I couldn't tell either, and I like the look of it. And I already made this joke on Twitter, but I'm going to make it again here. For a very brief moment, it kind of looks like Halloween Kills is going to basically be the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead of the Halloween series.
Which would have been a fresh angle.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we meet this beat cop who's running around during the events of the original Halloween, and we actually meet two cops, but one of them is played by Jim Cummings.
Yeah, favorite of Film Club.
A AV Club, Film Club favorite, Jim Cummings, director and star of Thunder Road, The Wolf of Snow Hollow, and the recent beta test, which we talked about on our episode about Fantastic Fest. I'm a big fan of his acting style. It's funny to see him in this world briefly, and I very briefly was like, man, it would be really amazing if this middle entry in this kind of needless trilogy was just like the events of Halloween 1978 from the perspective of a kind of Goonie cop.
That would have been a fresh look at the whole thing. Yeah.
Yep. Instead, it just uses the whole sequence is just a way to. It's actually another retcon, a way to basically add some dimension, some part of the story we didn't know happened from the 1978 version.
Yeah.
It reminded me a little bit of all things, of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, where we learn that Uncle Ben's killer is actually Thomas Hayden Church from as becomes Sandman in that film. In this one, it's like there's this aspect that we didn't know that happened that night.
Yeah, something that happened that night that is like a reason why this keeps happening.
Yep.
So
I mean, like this is a film that's very obsessed with the original Halloween without necessarily capturing anything that made that movie special. In this case, what they do is they trot out a bunch of characters who we remember from the first film. We get older versions of them. So it's not just Laurie anymore. Yeah. We get other people who appeared.
It's the kids who were being babysat in the original Halloween, now all grown up and fucked up in their own ways.
You could make the case that what the movie is going for, and I don't think it pulls this off, but you can make the case, is the idea that what happened on that night in 1978 was a town trauma as much as it was Laurie's trauma.
Yeah.
The idea that it wasn't just Laurie touched by this, that there was a whole web of people, and that this town has been living with it the whole time.
And it's her family too, they really go. They give a lot of screen time to Laurie's daughter and Laurie's granddaughter in this one, and how how this has affected them, especially her daughter, played by Judy Greer. You see a lot of, kind of how she handles this intergenerational burden that she's been handed by her mother. And it's played very straight and very serious. And like Judy Greer's really acting her ass off there. And so is Jamie Lee Curtis. And then, it just undercuts the whole thing with like cutting away to a flippant joke.
Yeah. And some of the violence is very flippant too. And I think this is what I was trying to get at earlier in the episode, is just talking about the fact that this is a movie that wants us to take seriously the fact that these are people who are deeply touched by this experience, but also has no qualms about murdering them in a way that might elicit cheers from the audience.
And that's fine. I think it's fine. I don't think you really need to overanalyze the impulse that makes people cheer when Michael Myers stabs somebody. I don't think that you really need to like get moralistic about that. Like, it's just a human response, and it's fine. But I do think that this movie is just trying to do too much. Like, is it this heady, thematic, moralistic film, or is it a guilty pleasure bloodbath?
Right.
It tries to be both.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Don't you think it's possible that the way that somebody is killed in a movie like this matters, too, in terms of our relationship to that character?
Sure.
Now, I'll say that, like, occasionally in a movie like Halloween, you'll meet a character who you like, who the movie engenders some degree of sympathy or affection for, and then we see them die, and you have complicated feelings about it, because it is sort of what you come to a slasher movie to see, is to see these characters die, but also you don't always feel great about it. You feel kind of sad about it. This is a movie that turns some of the deaths of characters who we are ostensibly supposed to enjoy into cheap punchlines, I think.
Yeah, cheap punchlines, and also like sadistic gore set pieces also. Yeah.
I might be being a little too sensitive about a Halloween movie of all things. But I do think that this one encourages you.
It's not even about you being too sensitive. It's about the movie being inconsistent and thoughtless.
You're right. I think it is very much about the movie's inconsistent relationship to its violence, to its characters.
Yeah, to its tones, to its plot lines, to what it's trying to do. I just really found this to be a very messy, confused film.
It's a big swing and a miss, I think, is what it is, honestly.
Yeah, and the inconsistency also kind of gives the game away in the sense that when a character's death is supposed to resonate with us and really matter, then you know that Green is really trying to make a point here, and that undercuts the point he's trying to make.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, for sure. I think one of the many things that just bugs me about this movie is that it also very much like there's no actual reason for there to be a whole trilogy of these films at all, other than the fact that they're making money, you know?
Well, that's the true reason why Michael Myers never dies.
For sure.
Let's be honest.
But this feels very much to me like a middle chapter in the sense that there's a lot of wheel spinning. It lacks the one might say it lacks the thrill of reintroducing this world, and there's no closure at the end of it. So the notion that you're even going to be getting something that feels remotely complete by the end of this film, it basically just turns into a preview for Halloween Ends, which is coming next Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can assume in a slasher movie that the villain is probably not dead, but this one, the fact that they've already announced the next one is just another way that this is not a suspenseful film. And then also, talking about doing too much and the lack of suspense and the tonal inconsistency, all the points we keep hammering, they cram in so many jump scares in like that flashback sequence you were talking about in the first 15 minutes that, again, it shoots itself in the foot because none of the jump scares work after that because they crammed so many of them in the beginning.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you've hit on something there, though, which is just that, going into this, that Michael Myers is not going to die. Mm-hmm. There's even a sequence where the movie is trying to fake us out at the notion that he could die, But there's another one coming next October, and and guess what? Jamie Lee Curtis is signed up for that too, So, and a lot of wheel spinning.
There's a lot of wheel spinning, and and something that I think about when I was writing the review of this is how much of this is thoughtlessness and how much of this is dishonesty. Like is like because I feel that like maybe their intentions were good and they're just trying to put too much into it, or maybe they're just fundamentally dishonest about what the movie is and what it's about by trying to put on a sheen of that it's something more than what it really is. And I think in that case, then it should just be what it really is, and they shouldn't try to put this big thematic weight on top of it. All right, so Halloween Kills is out now in theaters and on Peacock. And if you want to hear us talk about the Halloween series as a whole, perhaps in a more positive light, you can check out our main episode this week, which is also up on the site now. And while you're at it, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Film Club wherever you get your podcasts.
This week's special bonus episode of Film Club was hosted by me, Alex Dowd, and by Katie Reif. It was produced by Carl Blomberg. Our sound mixer and finishing editor is Zach Goldsboro, and our motion graphics designer is Julie Mullins. Stay tuned next week for a brand new episode of Film Club. Thanks, folks.